Gentleman's Guide here. This is part 2 of the text game series. If you didn't catch last week's part 1 video, I highly suggest watching that first because it really lays the foundation that this video builds on, so I'll put the link right here. Now on to the video. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever gotten a text from a girl you liked and didn't know how to respond at all? Maybe you couldn't tell if she was into you or not. Maybe you didn't know whether it was the right moment for you to ask her out, or if you should just continue having normal conversation. Maybe you were scared of flirting with her and coming off as creepy, or being too nice and ending up in the friend zone. If you answered yes to any of this, then let me explain something that'll really help. You see, anything a girl texts you will be either one of the following 4 different types of text, and these 4 types are ignoring, testing, friendly and logical, and positive. Think of these 4 types of texts as kind of a flowchart from worst to best. When a girl is ignoring you or giving you one-word responses, that's the worst spot to be in because she's not interested. And when a girl is texting you really positively, going along with everything you're saying, that means she's into you and you should ask her out. If you can tell which of the 4 types she's texting to you, you'll know where you are in the interaction and how to nudge the conversation into the right direction. So the next time a girl texts you, stop for a moment and ask yourself, which of the 4 types of text is this? So let's first start with ignoring. Like we just mentioned, if a girl is ignoring your texts or not being very responsive, it means she's not interested in you. When this happens, the last thing you should do is to make plans to meet up or trying to ask her out. A very common mistake I see guys make is that they'll try meeting up with the girl even when she's been ignoring him or giving one-word answers. Like they'll literally double text, "Hey, wanna meet up? Hey, wanna meet up?" Remember, her interest in you is low in this stage, so she'll almost always continue ignoring you the more you try asking her out. What you need to do instead is to show her more of your personality in a fun, engaging way. A good way to do this is with the fun-giving mentality. I explained this topic in my part 1 video from last week, but basically, with a fun-giving mentality, what you want to do is send her funny, engaging messages without asking for anything in return. Something like a joke, a meme, or a cool story about something random that happened to you today are all examples of a fun-giving mentality. You see, the point of a fun-giving mentality is that you're providing fun and excitement in her life without requiring a response. And the reason why this works so well is because if she chooses to ignore you again, it won't be a big deal at all. In fact, it'll look way better than if she had ignored a question or you trying to meet up. If you keep texting her with this fun-giving mindset without asking for anything in return, most of the time she'll eventually move from ignoring to the testing kind of text. Let me quickly explain what testing is. It's when a girl kind of screws with your head a bit, saying or asking something to try to get an emotional response from you, just to see how you'll react. The reason she does this is to test how confident you are. An example of this can be, "Oh, I bet you say that to all the girls," or "Ha, you're totally the player type, I can tell just by looking at you." If you play it cool and pass her test, she'll know you're a confident guy, and she'll like you more as a result. On the other hand, if you overreact and fail her test, she'll know you're not very confident, and her interest in you will drop. If she's testing you though, don't worry, that's good news. It means she's actually putting in the effort to respond to you, when before she was just ignoring you. So you're definitely headed in the right direction. When you start getting the testing type of text from her, the key thing to do is just to pass her test, to show her you're not fazed by her, and that's it. A good way to pass almost any test is with the exaggeration technique. I like this technique because it adds humor, and it also shows her you don't take yourself too seriously, which are both things girls find attractive. Here's an example of how it works. Let's say a girl gives the same test I mentioned before. "Oh, I bet you say that to all the girls." Using the exaggeration technique, you can say something like, "Yeah, I do, but normally I forget their faces." By going along with what she's saying and exaggerating it, you pass her test by letting her know you're not fazed by it. The most important thing to remember is just to pass her test, nothing more. Don't pass her test, then follow up with a question or trying to make plans, because that'll take away from you passing her test, and it'll also make you seem super needy. Just pass the test and leave it at that. From my experience, when you pass enough of her tests, she'll either start sending more of a friendly, logical type of text, or skip straight to a more positive text type. Assuming she chooses to go the friendly, logical route, let's address that. The friendly and logical type is exactly what it sounds like. It's just normal conversation, something like, "Oh, I went to the library today to study, can't wait for Friday night." Getting this type of text is a very good sign because she's taking the time to respond to you, meaning her interest in you is increasing. If the conversation just started to get friendly and logical, especially after some initial ignoring and tests, then how I suggest responding is to give a brief response to answer her back, but then adding on a bit of witty flirting at the end. Let's give an example of this. Using the same example of a friendly logical text from before, you might reply with something like, "Nice, I've been meaning to check out that library, and I'm glad you're already thinking about spending a Friday night with me." Adding this playful flirting at the end helps push the conversation from friendly to positive faster. I want to point out that context is what's important here. Like we just mentioned, if the conversation just started to become logical after a more negative start, you should use the brief response plus flirting technique we just mentioned. But if she's been sending you positive flirty texts all day long and then sends one logical text, you should still treat it like a positive text, give a brief response, but instead of adding flirting at the end, actually ask her to meet up. And finally, the last type of text, the positive response. Like we mentioned before, this is the best situation to be in because she pretty much already likes you. It's usually pretty easy to tell if she's sending you a positive text. Most of the time, she'll be really receptive to whatever you say, send lots of emojis, and use lots of ha-has, LOLs, things that give positive emotion. When you're getting a positive text, that means that it's time for you to start making plans to meet up. A really common mistake I see guys make is that the girl will be obviously into him, sending him lots of positive texts and initiating conversation, but for some reason the guy never actually makes plans to meet up. He just keeps on talking, carrying on the conversation, being really safe and funny. Remember, at the end of the day, the whole point of texting her is to meet up with her in person, so if she's sending you positive texts, don't hesitate to pull the trigger. I covered this in last week's part 1 video, but when you actually try asking her out, I don't recommend straight up asking her if she wants to come out with you. Instead, try asking a series of questions to get her thinking about the date. Something like, hey, do you have good taste in hip-hop music? And then, how do you feel about rap concerts? And then finally, what's your schedule like this weekend? By doing this, you can kind of feel out what she's into and find out her schedule, and then use that to plan a great date. So those are the 4 types of text. You should now have a roadmap of how to read any text she sends you, instantly categorizing it under one of the 4 text types to see where you are in the interaction, and then responding to that text type in the appropriate way in order to move the conversation towards positive. So to summarize, if she's ignoring you or rarely texting you, send something fun and interesting without asking for anything. If she tests you, just pass her test without trying to ask a question or make plans to meet up at the end. If she's texting you logical conversation, just respond briefly while adding some flirting at the end to push it towards the right direction. And if she's sending you a positive text, take that as a green light to ask her out, but do it using a series of questions rather than just bluntly making plans. That's it for the video. Next week will be part 3 of the text series installment, so click here to subscribe and stay tuned.